Today's guest is Dr. Terri Fox. Dr. Fox is a medical doctor trained in functional and integrative medicine and specializing in biotoxicity, so think mold and Lyme. This is a topic very close to my heart because I'm seeing more and more of my clients with chronic illness that I am now realizing is actually related to mold illness. And in my journey to try and find ways of helping them, I've come across Dr. Terri Fox's work, and I've listened to all of the podcasts where she's been a guest on, and I've done the first few modules of her mold masterclass. So I am incredibly excited to bring her on the show today to share her wisdom with our audience. I'm also hoping to bring you more specialists from various fields in a section on the show I'm going to call Wellness Wednesdays, where we discuss non-homeopathic options to broaden our horizon. Towards the end of the interview, we chat a bit with Dr. Fox about her upcoming Mould Masterclass, which starts on the 17th of June. To learn more about her masterclass, which is for clients as well as practitioners, visit www.drfoxmedicaldetective.com. Dr. Fox has kindly arranged a special 10% discount for listeners of this podcast. Just enter the code HANGOUT at the checkout and receive your 10% discount. So that's www.drfoxmedicaldetective.com and enter the code HANGOUT when you get to the checkout. And if you want to learn more about Dr. Fox, visit www.boulderholistic.com or check the show notes. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now my mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Homeopathy Hangouts. Today is a little bit of a different episode. I have got a new section on the podcast called Wellness Wednesdays, which I want to start implementing because homeopathy is amazing. And everyone knows I'm the biggest cheerleader of homeopathy ever. But very often we get stuck in cases and we need to draw on all sorts of other modalities and things that are out there. And so today I have a very special guest, Dr. Terri Fox. Welcome to the show, Terri.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan.
I'm a big fan. I've just started doing your course and I'm loving it. So I just cannot wait to pick your brains. And I've listened to all the other podcasts that you've done that are out there. And so I have loads more questions to ask you today. And I'm really excited about delving in. But I'd love if you can give our listeners a little bit of a background of how you stumbled upon the work that you do now.
So how I came to be a mold expert and doing mold.
Yes, sorry, I'm being really cryptic there, but how did you become a mold expert?
Yeah. I am an MD. I went to University of California, San Francisco. I always wanted to do integrative and holistic health. I almost went to naturopathic school, but I was like, if I go to medical school, I can learn the other stuff and be able to do all of it. And so I did that. And then I did a board certification in integrative holistic medicine. And then I did all my functional medicine training, and I've been doing functional medicine for 24 years. And at some point, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, I realized that about 80% of my patients would get better with the normal functional medicine matrix. You get them sleeping, you optimize their nutrient status and their hormones and heal their gut, all that stuff. And then 20% of them just wouldn't budge. Like they just, nothing I did made any difference. And then I eventually figured out that those patients, most of them had biotoxin illness, which is mold, Lyme co-infections. A biotoxin is something that a living organism releases that makes us sick. So it's pathogenic or disease causing to humans. And then I started doing quite a bit of Lyme. And then my son was 8 years old and he was one of those do you have children? You do? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I've got two. 12-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Yeah. Any boys in there?
Yeah, 12-year-old boys, full on.
Yeah. So he was one of those crazy, just really active and thrill-seeking maniac, fearless, jumping off of things. And I felt like my whole job was just keeping him alive.
Yeah, sounds like twins.
Before he jumped in the water. Okay, just got him before he landed on the rocks. And he was scrappy, he was underweight, he was too busy to eat. And then he started limping. And it was like when no one was looking, he was limping. And so I would say his name was Kai. And I said, Kai, why are you limping? Did your knees hurt? Did something hurt? And he was like, nope, nope. And then he would start not limping. And then whenever I wasn't looking, or when he thought I wasn't looking, he would limp. And I knew like something's not okay. And so I tested him for a million things. And then I finally tested him for Lyme, and it was positive. And I started treating him for Lyme, and then realized I can't treat my son for Lyme. Lyme is real complicated. And so what happened was I tested him for Lyme, and I started treating him a little bit. And then at the same time, I smelled like a musty smell in his bedroom that for months I'd been like, it smells funky in here. And his dad and him and his brother were all like, we don't smell anything. You're crazy. And I was like, And so I got like a, mold inspector out, who went into the attic and found a water leak above Kai's room. And so that was the source of the moldy smell. And we were getting ready to leave the country on a 2-week trip to Vietnam with both of our extended families, because my kids are both a quarter Vietnamese. And so I organized for when we were out of country, to have a small family-run construction company come in and fix the water leak. And at this stage, I just knew nothing about mold. I knew nothing about remediation. I knew nothing about containment or negative air pressure. If I had, it wouldn't have ever gotten so bad. But we got back from Vietnam, and he never got out of bed for another 6 months. He was in 9 out of 10 pain in his head. It got worse with any movement. I called it a migraine. I didn't respond to migraine meds, but it acted like a migraine. I brought him to so many different doctors and specialists, and we went to the ER multiple times for migraine abortive IVs. We had an inpatient stay at Children's Hospital. I brought him to all these Lyme docs, like some are super wonderful and great. And then I ended up flying him out to Dr. Stephen Harris in California, who I adore. And he started him on antibiotics for Lyme, Borrelia, and Bartonella. And then he gave me a urinary mycotoxin test, a real-time labs one. And so we brought it home and we did it, and it was through the roof. And so I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So there's something else completely at play here. And at that stage, I knew enough from Dr. Harris to like get somebody good out, like an actual remediation professional. And so I had an indoor environmental professional out, and they found 3 feet of water under our entire house. So we had this huge crawl space that went under the whole house. Some parts it's like really small, some parts it's really big. And he cut the vapor barrier, and there's 3 feet of water under the whole thing. And our airborne spore traps were just in the red. I'd never seen airborne spore traps that high before or since then. And so at that stage, I knew mold is maybe the reason why the Lyme has either become chronic or why his system isn't clearing the Lyme on its own. And so we had the house remediated, which was a massive ordeal. And we moved out. I didn't really believe my son would ever get better in that house. And the marriage didn't make it through. But when I got Kai out into a non-moldy house and started him on phase 2 mold detox with antifungals, he got better pretty quickly. His migraine went away, and he started going back to school. And within 3 months, he was back at school full time, doing soccer 6 days a week again. And so that was my entry into mold. And from my perspective, the reason Kai had Lyme or chronic Lyme was because of the mold. So mold suppresses your immune system, and then Lyme can like reactivate and become active and opportunistic in the presence of mold. And so that is what happened for him. As soon as he was out of the mold and treated for the mold, the Lyme went back into dormancy. And he could have gotten the Lyme from me, because I grew up in Virginia, where it's endemic, it's everywhere, and everybody I know has had Lyme from there. And so you can pass it in utero. So it could have like come out because of the mold exposure, or we can't constantly, or we still do. So he could have gotten that exposure here as well. But I think the real big thing for him was mold. And so now that's what I do primarily.
I think this is the part of why I love the podcast so much, but always also why I love being a homeopath, because I love listening to people's stories of how they came to do what they do. And sometimes it feels like the universe is guiding a person through ups and downs and sometimes unbelievably hard places. But it's hardly ever in life that things happen where you look back and it doesn't make sense, or it wasn't for a reason, or there wasn't something good that came out of it in the end, because now you're helping thousands of people around the world not have to go through the same hard times that you have. Isn't that incredible? Hey,
but it is incredible. And then I ask universe all the time, like, can you not teach me through my own children?
Yes. Yeah. Just leave my kids out of this.
Bring me information. I'll promise I'll study and learn.
Well, the reason why I'm so passionate about this is the universe sent me the most incredible husband who's my best friend and my soulmate and everything. But he's also a project in that he has so many health issues, chronic things. Like he's gone through so many natural and conventional practitioners over the many years, and nobody really has had any answers until he went to a functional medicine doctor maybe 2 years ago, and she sent him to this website, vcstest.com. I don't know if you've heard of that. So he went there and it came up very high for mold. And so she said he has SIRS. And concurrently with that, we had a family at the school whose daughter was diagnosed with SIRS, and she was always sick, really pale, very dark under the eyes, no energy. And the family couldn't figure out what was going on. And it was eventually that was diagnosed that they had mold in their air conditioning in their home. And it was incredibly traumatic because it was through COVID. And they had to remediate this entire home. They had to move out. It was like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the kids had to throw away all of their toys because the mycotoxins obviously go into the toys and their furniture. It's so heartbreaking. So this is where I started perking up, and I'm like, holy moly, mold is so much bigger than what I realized. And because we live here in Perth, it's apparently has got the most sunshine hours of any city in the world. And so you wouldn't expect mold to live here. But then, which we'll probably talk about soon as well, is just the way the homes are built these days. There's no ventilation, all that stuff. I don't want to give too many spoiler alerts here at the start, because I actually want to backtrack right to the start, what you were saying about your son and this types of symptoms. So just firstly, I want to start with, what are some symptoms that you see in your clinic? So what should make people's ears and senses perk up that maybe you are dealing with mold?
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you all the common symptoms. There are so many. It can be confusing, but the really common ones are fatigue and brain fog. And brain fog is cognitive dysfunction of all kinds. So word recall, memory loss, difficulty focus and concentration. And then a lot of headaches and migraines, and then a lot of unusual neurological presentations, numbness, weakness, tingling, burning, ice pick sensations, vibrations, like weird neuropathic, involuntary muscle movements. And they don't fit into any regular neurological diagnosis. So you go to a neurologist, they're like, nothing, you don't have anything, you're fine. And then there's a rapid weight gain, weight loss, which is a big clue for me. If somebody says, I think another clue is your timeline. You started getting sick a few months after moving into a new property, and then you have a 30-pound weight gain in a month and a half, something really unusual and strange. That can be a big clue. But also I see a lot of hair loss, acne, frequency of urination, allergies get worse. There's a lot of gut dysfunction. So quite a few symptoms.
And something else I wanted to clarify from the start is that your son got really sick, but you were all living in the same house. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So only a quarter of the population is sensitive to mold. So the people that get sick from mold can't detox it. They can't metabolize it and break it down and get it out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. And there's genetic factors and other factors for that. But so it's actually the most common is that only one, maybe two people in the house get sick. So if it's only one, but it's crazy because if there's only one person sick in the house, how can it could be the house? It puts so much strain on the family and relationships, because what are you talking about? How can it be the house? We're all fine. And for Kai and I was sick too. I was really sick. But my other son and my husband were not sick at all. They were totally fine.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that's important to be aware of. So Why I want to start with this is that people might think, oh, this podcast is about mold. It doesn't apply to me. But I want them to know about the huge variety of symptoms, how differently it can present, and also that not everybody is going to be affected, so that they realize it's worth listening to this and just really thinking, if it doesn't apply to you personally, maybe there's friends or family members that might really be suffering all sorts of health concerns at the moment and might not have thought of mold as an option, especially if, like me, you're living in a really sunny place and you think that mold shouldn't be an issue because it's sunny. So can you tell us a little bit about why, even
Boulder's
if we live...
the same. So Boulder's, they say, is 300 days of sun a year, and it's really dry. It's not humid at all. And so the home inspectors, like I remember getting a home inspector when I finally bought a safe home. And I said, can you do, and I had my own mold people come in and check it, but I was like, just keep an eye out for any water damage or anything. And he looked at me and he was like, there's no mold in Colorado. And I was like, it's 90% of my practice. You're insane. But we had a major flood in 2013. Really, most of the houses in Boulder are moldy. And I think it's partially because it's not humid and it is sunny all the time and it's sort of arid. So when it flooded, people had no awareness. So people in areas that flood, they'll rip up the carpet, they'll cut out the bottom of the drywall, like they're on it. Like here, everybody put a fan on it and just didn't worry about it. And then 3 years later, my practice is full of mold sick people.
So can you tell us a little bit about why it seems to be quite a big problem these days? Is it one of those things of just more awareness, or do you think there's something else going on?
I think there's a variety of things. We have that 25% of the population number that's been the estimated number for a long time. But of course, it's what I do. So it's the lens I'm looking at it. So it feels like everybody. But I do think it's more common. And there's a few reasons that you can point to, which one is the way that we build. And I don't know if they do the same in Australia, but
they do.
They do.
Where there's no ventilation. Yeah.
Yeah, and mold lives on cellulose, so paper, porous materials, wood, and we build our homes with drywall. It's just mold food, and then wood floors and drywall everywhere. And then we put pipes of water going through the mold food, and we hope for the best. And water leaks are going to happen. I mean, they happen. So that's, a part of it, I think, is our building material. And then another reason I really think is, so we know that if you expose mold spores to electromagnetic frequencies or EMFs, that it releases more mycotoxins, the toxins that make us sick. So you can imagine that maybe you could have tolerated a little mold in the basement in your house. And now you have a Wi-Fi and you have 5G. And now that little bit of mold in the basement is releasing 10 times more mycotoxins into the environment. So that could easily be one of the factors that is making it more prevalent. And then what you were describing in that story, I feel like a lot came out of COVID because people were in their homes 24/7. They weren't leaving and getting out of their house. So maybe they could tolerate a certain amount. And then once they were in their house all day for a year, their system crashed and tanked.
Interesting.
And then there's also total body burden, the amount of toxins and infectious things and inflammation that builds up in our bucket and overflows and crashes the systems. I imagine it's probably similar there, but we get exposed to 700,000 toxic chemicals a day in the air we breathe and the water we drink and the food that we eat. And so imagine how full that bucket is already. And then you get a mold exposure and your system is going to crash. Whereas 40 years ago, we didn't have glyphosate, and you guys don't have glyphosate in Australia.
Oh,
right?
no, we do. It's still on the supermarket shelves as Roundup.
You're kidding me.
No, I wish I was kidding. And they spray it in all the parks here. And they will have a sign up. They will have a sign up at a park saying, glyphosate spraying in progress. The second they finish spraying, they will take the sign with them and go. So if you and your toddler and your dog walk past 5 minutes later on that grass, it's unbelievable. It's actually unbelievable.
It really is. And yeah, we won't get sidetracked.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, it's actually
all of Europe.
It's on the same track actually, because of course the Roundup the glyphosate destroys your microbiome as well, which then is going to make the mold be able to flourish even more.
100%. And it messes up your barrier function. So your small intestinal wall, your blood-brain barrier. So then you have glyphosate, which you can't avoid, even if you eat organic, because it just blows in the wind everywhere. So organic food all has glyphosate in it in the US. And then you have a leaky blood-brain barrier, and then you get a mold exposure, and all those neurotoxins can just get in really easily.
Something that you mentioned about the EMFs and the mold, are there any studies on that? Because that's something like I was trying to figure out, why would EMF have a effect on mold? Is it something, because my homeopathic freak brain, which is all about frequencies and energies and susceptibilities and things like that, I'm thinking, is there something about the vibration or the energy of EMF that somehow resonates with mold and amplifies each other? Or what is it about EMF and mold? Are there any studies on this?
Yeah, I can probably find you. I believe I have a reference in my course. I could probably send it to you. I think EMFs are just awful.
They are.
For the health and depletes your melatonin. It messes up your mitochondrial function. To me, it wasn't surprising to hear, but I don't actually know why it would do that, why the frequency of it would make so when you disturb mold is when it releases more mycotoxins.
Right.
So like you pull a piece of drywall out, it'll go. So maybe, I don't know, maybe the frequency, that's one you're going to have to tell me why.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is, can you differentiate a little bit for us with fungus and mold and candida? Like, is it the same thing, and how do they interrelate, and how's it different?
Yes, mold and yeast are, and I use the word yeast instead of candida because candida is one form of yeast and there's a whole bunch of them. But they're both fungal. And mold trumps most things. It's fungal. And in the presence of mold, it creates all the right conditions for yeast to flourish because they're both fungal and they like all the right same pHs and all that stuff. And so what I have found after treating mold for 12 years or something is that yeast is a part of every mold case. And sometimes it's a huge part and sometimes it's a small part, and you don't really know until you start getting in there and treating it. But I will say that I have found that it's present and that's a part of every mold case.
And then blow this up even more and to just make things even more confusing. I've just recently learned about how yeast can wrap itself around heavy metals. And so heavy metals because I do a thing called a LIGO scan or photospectrometry, and you can see somebody's heavy metals, vitamins and mineral status by doing a little scan on the palm of their hand. So sometimes we will do a scan and the metals won't show up that high, but then you'll see their chromium is very low, which will indicate that there could be candida issues. So you supplement them with chromium, you give them a homeopathic remedy made from candida and yeast and things to get that down, change their diet, get the sugar out, and then suddenly the heavy metals goes through the roof, which makes sense when I then learned that apparently the metals can hide inside the yeast. But then I've also heard that parasites can hide in there. And then you have this big soup of EMFs amplifying the molds and the yeast that the metals and the parasites hide in. And so it's like, which one amplifies which one? And I also had a chat with Ren Lloyd, who is called the autism homeopath, and she's got a group of homeopaths that all specialize in autism. And I told her that I'm going to be interviewing you because she believes that mold has a huge play or fungi in general has a huge play in cases of autism. And she said to ask you this question: do you think the body encourages fungi overgrowth to bind to the toxic metals, or does the body just become more susceptible to fungal overgrowth because of the toxic metals, which is a kind of a chicken and an egg thing? But I thought I'd throw it out there to you because it's also interrelated. Do you think because the body is always self-protective, right? So is it like creating this wrap around the metals and hide the metals, or are the metals there first and then because of that, the body becomes more susceptible to these other things? Sorry, that's a lot.
I know, right? So there's a lot of theories and a lot of different ways people describe it. Like I've heard metals are the scaffolding that yeast can hide behind, or mold can hide Lyme. Like there's different ways of looking at it, but it's really that toxic soup that we talk about, which is the same as a water damaged building. It also grows yeast, not just mold and bacteria and other things. And then I also look at it a little bit more like total body burden. So if you've got metals and then you've got yeast and then you've got mold, like the system is just going to crash easier. And chronic complex illness, we look at all of that. We look at the heavy metal load and the mold, if there's biotoxin from Lyme, and you can begin to pull any of those out and the person will start feeling better, just lowering that. But I don't know exactly, like, does the yeast go hey, let me hang out on you. I can grow my biofilm. Most biofilms are lots of different organisms in them. So like you can have a biofilm that has yeast and has parasites as well and like other things in it. So could have something to do with that. Like it creates this safe little biofilm home for parasites. So those are all the things that you named are the things, like I'm not answering your question directly because I'm not really sure, but all those things that you named are like, for me and treating Lyme, there's 5 top things why people can't recover from chronic Lyme disease. And you just named 4 of them.
Well, exactly. You did answer my question because I think this is what Ren would have not felt intuitively, and myself as well, is that it is actually just that visual of a glass of water and somebody's pouring like a little bit of mold, pouring a little bit of perfumes, a little bit of synthetic this and all the chemicals you're burdened with, and vaccinations and medication, and then the glass is overflowing. So then it doesn't really matter what's the thing that tips the system, that the straw that breaks the camel's back. There's just a lot of mess going on and one's feeding off the other. And like you say, sometimes you just need to start pulling those strings, and it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but you start pulling some strings and the plant might aggravate here or there and you go, okay, this is actually the main issue that I need to treat. But sometimes you don't really know until you start.
Exactly. Yes. It becomes evident as you start pulling out some of the pieces and treating some of the stuff. And it's pretty, if you're doing like a mold detox, you can add a heavy metal detox and environmental detox in pretty easily because you've got so much of the detoxification support already going. And a Lyme patient will layer all of that in.
And it's important for clients to know this because it often does get quite expensive, especially because the testing is so expensive. I wish there was a way to get the cost of the testing down. I know you mentioned a place that...
I imagine it with time, it'll come.
So as more people become aware of it, hopefully the prices will come down, because it's hard to make a client understand that you're spending all these hundreds, potentially thousands on supplements and testing and all that sort of stuff. And we don't have magic wands or crystal balls that we can say, okay, this is the main thing that's causing the most trouble in your system. So you have to just start somewhere and see what happens and then change tack and follow the symptom picture as it goes. Hey.
Yeah. And I personally think mold trumps all of it. Mold trumps metals, it trumps Lyme, it trumps environmental toxins, like it tanks the system. And so like when I have all of those, I always start with mold.
And it makes sense because I've just started doing your mold course, which we're going to talk about soon as well. And you mentioned some really good things in there. Mold is actually there to break down dead things. And so when we have mold in our body, it's like breaking our bodies down, but we're still alive. So it makes sense what you're saying.
It's digesting us from the inside out.
Yeah, I was really creeped out when you said that in the course, but also it made so much sense. I'm like, that's such a great description.
No wonder I feel so bad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else that you talked about in your course specifically, and some of the podcasts I've listened to, something I really like that you mentioned is that you use different binders for different mycotoxins. Can we talk just a little bit more about mycotoxins and what they are? Because some of our listeners might not understand that part of the picture about how you can move out of a house or still have symptoms, or in your case where your house was remediated, but your son got worse.
Okay, so mycotoxins are toxins that mold releases, and they're pathogenic or disease-causing to humans. Many of them are neurotoxins, meaning they attack your nervous system, so your brain, your peripheral nerves. What was the other couple of questions in there?
No, because I was about to ask you a different question about mycotoxins, and then I was suddenly thinking, I don't know if we clarified what mycotoxins are enough for our listeners to understand. So I don't want to go too far ahead if we haven't clarified, because the word mycotoxins might be new to them. I think we mentioned about yeast and molds and all that sort of stuff, but I don't know if we mentioned mycotoxins and specifically what their part is in all of this.
Yeah, so the molds that are pathogenic or disease-causing to humans are usually the water damage building molds, less than the outdoor molds. And it's because they release or secrete these mycotoxins that are toxic to humans. And it's like mycology, like fungal. Not a lot of people think I say microtoxins, like a microplastic or something. But yeah, so mycotoxins are pathogenic to humans. That's why we get sick from mold.
And then also, so in the case of where your home was remediated and you would think you would come back and your home would be better, what we call a maintaining cause was still there. But then often also when you start ripping open walls and things, it can release a lot of those mycotoxins. that were previously held in the walls.
Yeah.
And go into the furniture and soft, and that's like one friend had to throw the toys away because the mycotoxins go into the soft toys and the furniture. And
yeah, so the mycotoxins and mold itself both will live in cellulose and porous materials. So your drywall, your wood, anything soft and fluffy. So if you have hard plastic, you can wipe that down with hydrogen peroxide and bring it with you. But the soft and fluffy things are hard to get the mycotoxins off. They get in everything. But if you can throw it in a washing machine with borax, you can usually bring that with you. And then when you get out of the moldy exposure, and once your total body burden has come down and you've done mold treatment, phase 1 and phase 2, you'll start to realize every time I put on this coat, I get that smell. I guess I shouldn't have brought the coat, and you'll just get rid of it. So you'll start being able to tell which things you're reacting to. And when it's really bad in a home, the mycotoxins and the nanoparticles that mold releases that make us sick, they get in the very fiber of the house. So a good mold remediation, there's a lot to it. So you have to demo out the wet moldy materials and go an extra 12 inches. And then you have to do a small particulate cleanup, which is you HEPA vacuum every surface, like walls, ceilings, leather, furniture that you might bring, everything. And then you have to wipe everything down with an antifungal natural agent, like everything that is in the whole house, in a microfiber cloth. And then you fog it at the end and clean your ducts and fog the air ducts and all of that. There are cases where the mold is so bad that a mold sensitive person may not get well in that house, even with a good remediation. But there's also a lot of cases where it just wasn't a good remediation, which is one of the saddest things in this world of mold, because if you spend $20,000 and they didn't do it well and you're still sick, it's just awful. It's really sad.
It's funny, those people who are very sensitive to molds, they do become like bloodhounds. Like you can send them into a house and they can immediately tell you if there's mold or not. It's so interesting. I have so many questions for you, so I keep writing them down because we couldn't, if I had you here for 10 hours, I couldn't actually ask you everything that I want to ask you. But you were on a podcast called, I think, the Toxic Mold Podcast. And I think that the host of that podcast was more about the remediation. So he's not a medical professional, but it's about the remediation, making sure that you're doing that correctly. And so if you do suspect your home has mold, just don't go and make holes in the wall and start fixing things yourself, because you can actually make things worse. And those mycotoxins can go out into your house and make everyone more sick. So I'm very much at the start of my mold journey. It's one of those things that you were saying at the start, you've got your mold glasses on. And once you see how the symptoms can present, it's hard not to then see it in so many of your clients. For me, I'm very basic where I'm at the moment with what I know about mold. If I suspect somebody, for example, I've just recently found out that a lot of my clients with rheumatoid arthritis or all sorts of rheumatic complaints, it can actually be due to mold. And I found this great article on PubMed where they actually linked mold with rheumatism and rheumatic arthritis. And so then I send them to VCS test, just because it's about $25 to go on there. And I get them to do that visual contrast sensitivity test just to get an idea, is this what I'm dealing with? It takes about 10 minutes. You answer a few questions and they come back like 90% on the left eye and the right eye that it's mold and Lyme. And these days that test. So I'll get them to go and do that. And the other thing where I often suspect it is if I have clients come and see me with chronic congestion and we try all these different remedies, and is it allergies, is this, is it that, nothing works. And then I get them to go and do that test. And then I'll get them a remedy that we have called polyfungi detox, which was actually created by Ren, who is the autism specialist. And it's a remedy that has a variety of molds and yeasts and things in it. I'll give it to them and they'll usually have a massive aggravation with all the snot coming out, and suddenly they can breathe for the first time in their life. Yeah. So then I'm like, okay, so this is a case of mold. So I'll just aggravate them a little bit, but then they can breathe. And I'm like, okay, so mold is an issue, because they'll be like, no, my home is fine. I've lived in the same house my whole life. There's definitely no mold. I've had it checked. Their way of getting it checked. There's different ways to get it checked. Exactly. Yes. So that's why I just feel it's such a huge topic. And I hope that we can't cover everything that we need to in the next hour or so, but just to get people's ears to perk up about there might be something a little bit more to the story as well.
Yeah, I love that. One easy way is the VCS that you're talking about. And then that SIRS questionnaire, I think, is in the course. So if those two look positive, then maybe it's worth your investment in the test.
Mm.
And the reason to do the urinary mycotoxin is that then you know which strains and you know which binders and you know which treatments are going to work.
And actually, let's go to that next, because the reason I haven't done those tests yet, because I need to do them with my husband, is it's quite expensive, but I want to make sure that we do it right and we go to the right place. I usually use a place here in Australia called NutriPath, but I need to check how they compare to real-time labs that you use in America. And I don't know if you can post urine over to real-time labs to get it tested, because you've mentioned...
Do they do their own urinary mycotoxin?
They do, yeah, they do.
What's it called?
It's called NutriPath. Or NutriPath. So I'm just not sure how it would compare. So I feel like I would rather go with your suggestion because you've used them and you know that they work. And you've mentioned that they don't give any false positives, which means that to get the best bang for your buck, you do a bunch of awesome stuff to aggravate people before they go for the test. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the real-time labs mycotoxin is very specific and not very sensitive. What that means is that you don't get false positives, really. There's probably a tiny false positive rate, but you can miss quite a bit. If you just, so the people that get sick from mold are the ones that can't detox it. They can't metabolize it and they can't get out of their body. So if I just do a urine test on them, they're probably not going to show me anything, because if they were detoxing it and getting it out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat, they wouldn't be sick in my office. And so I provoke the real-time labs one. And I do an intense provocation because I just really want to know, is this our diagnosis or not? Am I barking up the right tree or what are we doing? So I do IV phosphatidylcholine and followed by glutathione, 3,000 milligrams over 90 minutes. And then about an hour later, we collect the urine. And what this does is this pulls mycotoxins out of the body. So you can get a sense of what all is in the system. And another thing to know about testing is just no binders for 3 days before a test, because you'll bind it in the stool, then you don't catch it in the urine. And then if I'm doing a retest on somebody, I'll actually have them stay on their antifungals, because when you take an antifungal, so going back to the congestion, the most common place of colonization for mold is the sinuses. Congestion here is just really, really common. And so if we're doing a retest, I keep them on the antifungal medication, because when you kill mold, it releases its contents, which are the mycotoxins. So that provokes the test more as well. But the real time has to be provoked. And then can you guys get Vibrant there?
I don't know. Is that a supplement?
No, it's a testing company.
Oh, okay. No, I don't know that.
Yeah, they do a great mycotoxin as well that I do trust. The issue with doing it with the course is that a physician has to order it for you. A patient can't just go order it online, but that one I think is pretty accurate as well.
The good news is actually the listenership is 50% in America and only 17% in Australia and about 17% in the UK. So actually half our listenership are from America. So they will know what you're talking about.
And you might be able to get Vibrant there. Who knows?
Who knows? I just want to say I have been loving your mold course, because like you were mentioning that you are only licensed to work in your state, but you obviously have this passion to help people with all this real life knowledge that you have. So you've created this incredible course where you guide people, and instead of spending thousands and thousands of dollars barking up the wrong tree, seeing practitioners who maybe don't really know what they're talking about, you are actually giving the power back into somebody's hand to treat their family themselves, but obviously with a supportive physician, because there are some testing and things. But the thing is, you can't just go to your physician because they do not get specialist training in mold. So they're not going to know how to help you anyway. So just talk to us a little bit about your course and why you've put that together and what people can learn from that.
Oh, sure. And I want to speak to what you just said as well. So in medical school, we don't get any training about mold. There wasn't a single word about mold illness or mold or anything in my entire medical training or residency or anything. So when you go to a regular doctor and they don't know about mold, they really just don't know. It's not within their, realm of knowledge. You have to go to somebody that does biotoxin or something. But so I created this course because I can't treat everyone. And there's a really specific order and framework that works really well. And people just They do really well with mold and when you do a good mold treatment. And I really just wanted to be able to bring the information into the world so that more people can heal and get better from mold illness. It's heartbreaking that so many people are out there and so sick. And it's pretty easy to make yourself sicker by going too fast or doing the wrong, thing in the wrong order. And it's not like, for me, I don't feel like it's a super complicated treatment process, but it's the order and pace is all really important so you don't make yourself more sick. Yeah. And so I created the course to be able to walk people step by step through the course. And I'm doing it live this summer for the first one. And so you'll have a Q&A with me after the module. So you can get all that kind of brainstorming, like, wait, but I did that and I felt worse and I did that kind of thing. We can tease all that out.
I love, because you've got a little teaser. So I think it's the first 3 modules or so that I've done. And in there you have an incredible handout that people can use for just like general detoxification. You've got some binders on there and infrared saunas and these types of things that you can start doing. You've got a little checklist there of what people need to do. And you talk about MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. And you mentioned that if that is a factor, then they need to address that before we go to this. And the way that you talk, even about the IV, like the aggravation that you do before you go and do the mold test, like you were saying, some places that you'll go to, they will force you to get the glutathione IV done at a quicker rate or something along those lines. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong, but there's one of them that you said they will try and make you do it quicker, but you shouldn't do it quicker. You should do it over the 90-minute period. So all this type of practical knowledge that you have, that you say, okay, do it this way. Do it this way. They're going to say, do this, but no, in my clinical experience, do this. So you're really walking people step by step and you feel really held in the process, which is great.
I'm so happy to hear that you felt that way. That's awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just experience, right? That's just like what you do. It's just doing this for so long. A lot of people will do IVPC, phosphatidylcholine by itself. And my experience is if you don't follow that with glutathione, you're releasing all these fat soluble toxins that have been in your brain for a whole life. And then they don't get out. They just immobilize them and then they move around and you get so much more sick. Like people feel horrible after PC if you don't follow it up with the glutathione. So if you do 3,000 milligrams of glutathione and you do it over 90 minutes, you get good cellular uptake. And then that pulls all those fat soluble toxins that were released out of the body in the urine, stool, and the sweat.
And something else that you mentioned as well is, I think we might have just touched on it, but once you have your mycotoxin test and you know what your main issues are, you've actually found that different binders work better with certain mycotoxins. Some people will just take charcoal and think that will do the trick, but actually you've found that you get a better result if you use a binder specific to the mycotoxin you're dealing with. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's one of the most common pitfalls that I see people trying to treat themselves and make themselves more sick or just not get better, is that you have to actually know what your unique mycotoxin load is in your body in order to choose the right binders. For example, trichothecenes, which come from black mold, those are like the most pathogenic disease causing. They're intense nerve toxins. And if you put somebody on cholestyramine, it won't touch trichothecenes. Like you'll still have all those, but activated charcoal will bind those really well. And then bentonite clay binds certain mycotoxins and cholestyramine binds other ones. And so you pick your binders based on your unique mycotoxin load and your results.
I mentioned to you quickly before we started, but there's this podcast that I'm loving at the moment called Red Pill Your Health Cast by Dr. Charlie Fagenholz. So I'm trying to get on the podcast as well, but I've often used diatomaceous earth in the clinic, but I've just recently heard him say it's not something that he recommends because diatomaceous earth, because it's such a good binder out in nature, it can actually bind to heavy metals in nature. So you have to make sure that you find a really pure source if you do use it. And he muscle tests a lot of the diatomaceous earth samples and has found that not many of them are actually really pure. So I've only just recently found that out. And that's the thing, is like, why I love and hate my job, because there's so much to learn and we always try to do the best for our clients. Yeah, we don't want to hurt any of them. But then also we only learn these things by experience. And I'm sure that you would have had to give a few of the wrong binders to your clients in the past to know that, okay, that's not the best binder to use with that one, because unless there's a manual written about it, it's trial and error. And so
I remember the moment that I found out that charcoal, cholestyramine, and everything would not bind gliotoxin. I was like, wait, what? What binds it? And it was bentonite clay. I was like, I didn't know that. Like, no wonder some of them don't get all the way better or whatever. So yeah, it's a learning process, but there's an infinite amount for us to learn out there. It keeps it fun and exciting.
It really is. So I started asking about the course and I jumped about the binders, and then I just want to jump back to the course. That's just, can you talk to us about the modules? Some of us have already done like the little pre-modules. And then from my understanding, the 17th of June is when the live training starts, right? So what are the modules that you're going to go through? How long is it going to go for? Just talk to us about some of the things that people will learn throughout the course.
Specific. Yeah. So if you register for the class, you get the first 9 modules, which just get you up to speed and then get you in, you understand what mold is doing and you understand detoxification. And then it gets you up to the testing part so that you can get your test results done and ideally in hand by the time that we start live with the masterclass. So we start with treatment phase 1, which is bind and unwind. And that starts June 17th. So it's every Monday at 5:00 Mountain Daily Time in the US. And it'll go for 9 weeks. And so first we do treatment phase 1, and then it's a little backwards because I wanted like people to get into the treatment when we started, but then we do the testing of the home and all about remediation and all of that. And then I have a couple Q&As in there with just some smaller modules on mark-ons and other smaller issues so that there's more time, because people need to be doing phase 1, bind and unwind, for as long as they need to. So the first phase is training your body how to detox and metabolize and pull out these mycotoxins. And you have to be doing that really successfully for at least 4 weeks before you start phase 2. And phase 2 is antifungals and biofilm. So you can imagine if you just found out you have mold and you start an antifungal, what it's going to do is kill any colonized mold spores, release more mycotoxins into the system, and it's going to flood your system with more of the same thing that was already making you sick. So you're not going to be successful in that way. And phase 1, you're having daily bowel movements. You're on full doses of binders. You've got all your organ detox. You're sweating. You're using your biotoxin relief handout, finding the things that work for you. And you're doing that for at least 4 weeks on full doses before you start phase 2. And so then we do phase 2, which is kill or be killed. And then there's the rest of it is really about staying healthy. So what I don't want is people to live in fear of mold and to then think that all this stuff about the limbic system and the vagal nervous system, your sympathetic overdrive. Once you've been really sick and then you get better and then you go into a moldy building and your symptoms come back, your nervous system panics and your adrenals fire and your limbic system goes, oh my God, am I going to go all the way back? So if you don't like retrain and the nervous system and the sympathetic drive and the vagus nerve and all of that, then it's almost like, it's funny to explain because it's not that it's in your head, but your head is making it worse. So because your head is panicking, then that increases the inflammatory cascades. That is what mold does. And so then you do get more. So if you can detach your emotional response from the physical sensation, then you'll walk into a moldy building. You might feel a little foggy and crappy, but then you'll leave and you'll bounce back quickly. And so there's nervous system retraining is important for some people. That has to come first. So the like really sensitive people will often need to do that part first because their body really won't heal if they don't feel safe. And,
I have to say that's where homeopathy is awesome because it's energy medicine. So we find you the remedy that resonates with that PTSD, that trauma response that your body had. So what is it about the experience that you went through when you went through mold and you were at your worst? What was it about that experience that traumatized you the most? And then we find the remedy that matches that energetic symptom picture, and then it removes that.
So there's limbic retraining, nervous system rebooting and retraining, just so that you begin to learn tolerance. And there's a whole module on tolerance and resiliency. So my goal is that we lower that total body burden and we learn really to be tolerant so that you can go away and go into a moldy building for a couple of days and you're going to be okay. And that's the goal. It's not to live in an extreme avoidance in a tent or something. I want people to get their lives back. And not that you're going to feel great in a moldy building ever if you're mold sensitive, but it doesn't have to take you down and make you completely sick like you were before. And then there's a whole module on yeast, because we talked about where there's mold, there's yeast. And what I have found is it's a huge part of the puzzle for many people. And so we work on the yeast clearance, and then there's a mold prevention module. Can't even remember all the rest, can you?
I can't off the top of my head. That is a lot already. And I actually really love that you have that positive spin on it, because that is the reality, right? Like I always say to my clients as well, if you're dairy intolerant, or if you have this allergy or that allergy, we want to get you to a place where you can tolerate most things. Like you should be able to go to a birthday party and let your kids have the crappy food and not have to pay the price for that afterwards. Like we need resilience is what it comes to at the end of the day. Like being resilient is the sign of true health. If you've got resilience, that's true health. So you might get a little bit sick, but you should be able to bounce back really quickly. That's true health.
100% agree. And I did the same thing with my kids. I was like, eat whatever you want at the birthday party.
Exactly. We should be able to live.
Yeah,
because I see people so often, I'm sure many people know people like this in their lives who are so strict with their diet and they just don't ever seem to be having any fun. Like you need to be able to have a bit of fun as well.
I agree. I get all these patients who they've been so sick for so long and they've seen so many doctors. They're trying, right? And so they're layering different diets on top of each other. So they're starting on the GAPS and then they're adding FODMAPs and then they try to do low histamine and then they try to do a mold one. And by the time they get to me, they're eating 5 foods. And I'm like, this is not okay. You can't just eat 5 foods. Like that's not ever going to be okay.
No, that's not a life. No.
Yeah. And in Boulder, I think we have more people that get obsessive about what they eat and their exercise, and a lot of competitive athletes and stuff.
Oh, interesting. So anybody who wants to sign up to your course can go to drfoxmedicaldetective.com. And we actually have a code that they can use as well for any of our podcast listeners, which is just Hangout. So you can just type Hangout in the checkout. And when you sign up for the course, and we'll also have it in the show notes as well. But drfoxmedicaldetective.com. They can find out some more info on there. Is there any final message that you want to leave our listeners with, Terri? Any final messages of hope or anything that we might not have? There's like a bajillion things that we didn't cover, but any really important bits of information that you would have liked to make sure that we cover today that we didn't?
Sure. One thing is I do have one remaining free webinar. So if people are interested and they want to do another live webinar or a live webinar with me, there's one on June 19th at 6 p.m. Boulder or Mountain Daily Time. And the website for that, or the link for that, is moldmasterclass.drfoxmedicaldetective. It's too long.
That's mold with an American spelling, just for, us with British spelling. So it's MOLD.
Right.
moldmasterclass.drfoxmedicaldetective.com. It's not that hard.
Yeah. Okay.
Remember that.
And so the main thing I really would like to say is that mold really is treatable. The hardest part about a mold diagnosis is getting out of the exposure. But once you get out of the exposure, if you do it in the right order and you do it slowly and gently and you respect your body's ability to detox, like people get better. It's not a bad diagnosis. People get better. They do really great. And it's not that long. You don't feel worse before you get better. And I encourage you to keep being hopeful and find your way out. It's a completely treatable diagnosis.
Amazing. And it means so much more coming from somebody who's been there and done that personally, because I have a gripe with people who preach things that they haven't been through or done themselves or have much experience in themselves. So the fact that you have been there, you've come out the other end and you're helping thousands of people do the same, I salute you for that. That is really amazing. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. And I cannot wait to learn more from you. I'm so excited for the rest of this course to start and go on this journey with you. And I know that knowledge is going to be so great to put into practice with my clients and also with my husband. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.